there guys, this is TheBassSinger through and 3 here, and welcome to the first ever episode of Compare and Contrast, where we pit in two similar games and compete them to see which one is superior. And in this week's episode, we've got the Capcom reboot, DMC Devil May Cry, that is a very, very stupid name, versus Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, which, well, admittedly in hindsight is also kind of a stupid name as well.
2013, the year in which two hack-and-slash games compete to see who's the better game. It's quite an extreme coincidence how these two games are similar to each other. Both games are released relatively close to one another, DMC releasing in January 2013, and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance releasing in February 2013. Both characters are also promoted in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, as if it was meant to be.
I will note some key features in both games in terms of story, gameplay, and presentation, and see which one out of the two I find the most rewarding. Now, with that being said, let's start off with our first game, DMC Devil May Cry.
Now, I am aware of the controversy behind the new reboot of Devil May Cry within its release. This game has been panned and negatively responded by fans of the old Devil May Cry series, with the reasoning behind all this backlash is due to how radically different the new Dante is compared to the old one. And as controversial as it may seem, I will not take account previous entries of the franchise as my deciding factor on what I think of DMC as a whole. Don't get me wrong, the Devil May Cry series is still fantastic, and I wholeheartedly recommend trying out the series. -2. Maybe 1. Besides, if I did consider it, I would also have to consider the same for the Metal Gear series, and as you know, Metal Gear Rising barely plays anything like any other Metal Gear game, spin-off or otherwise. My firm belief is that a game should not be judged by its predecessors unless it's a direct sequel, and since both games are reboots and spin-offs retrospectively, I will be judging them on their own account. With that being said, let's get cracking. We start off with the introduction of two villains, the main baddie himself, Mundus, who happens to rule the majority of Limbo City, and is hiding publicly as a corporate commander, alongside his prostitute side whore named Lilith. They gloat about how much power Mundus has up until he sends the son of Sparta amongst his grasp. That young man is Dante, our titular hero with an obsession with pizza and TNA. He is greeted with a female sidekick who warns Dante of Mundus' reign of terror, but Dante shrugs it off as if it was nothing bad happening. 3 seconds later, something bad happens. 1 censorship later, Dante straps up his gear and kicks some demon ass, recovering both his coat and his guns, Ebony and Ivory, and investigates the commotion done by one of Mundus' demons. Once we corner him, he reminds us of our dead mother, and with snarky remark, Dante turns him into a shish kebab. Afterwards, while Dante is a little hesitant on helping a resistance force called the Order, Kat convinces him to, at the very least, listen to Dante's backstory, whom he forgot because of amnesia syndrome. His father Sparta is full demon, and his mother Eva is a human, and according to the demon world, demons and humans are outlawed and therefore sentenced to death by Mundus' goons. Little did they know they had 2 children before their mother died, and their father is sentenced to eternal punishment. One of them being Dante, and the other his twin brother, Virgil, whom we meet when we enter the Order. Dante obliges to join in and take down Mundus and his goons, and the first objective is to take down a soda company, Vertility, whose liquid juices is produced by a succubus who's named... Actually, I don't remember. I'm not even sure if she has a name. She just sort of shows up, and then we dispose her like the first boss, and it's a repeat for, really, any of the boss battles. With our next battle being a news anchorman. During our journey to fight him, we come across Phineas, a cybernetic demon who's completely helpless against Mundus' goons. We help him, and he guides us on our way to fight against Barbos from Raptor News. We dispose of him, but as we get distracted, the Order got breached by SWAT teams. Most of the members of the Order are killed, off screen, but Dante's main concern is saving Virgil and Kat. He eventually arrives there, but Virgil's terabytes worth of data is very valuable towards the success of overtaking Mundus. They need to back it up immediately, but knowing how they are about to get breached, they need to sacrifice Kat. Virgil was planning on doing this anyways, but Dante, being the main hero of the story, exemplifies how horrible the situation would be without Kat. Nonetheless, Kat obliges and sacrifices herself to save Dante and Virgil. This is where the part we're supposed to believe Kat dies, especially with gunshots by the end of the cutscene. However, oddly enough, the next cutscene afterwards shows Mundus incarcerated Kat rather than killing her. He's using her as a hostage, and his negotiations are for Dante to surrender to Mundus, or Kat dies. With both of them not having any of that, they come across a plan to kidnap Lilith, along with her unborn child, whom Dante knew this information when interacting with Phineas. So, the plan commences in the club Lilith runs, we fight her, she surrenders, and a new negotiation commences. We bring Lilith, and Mundus brings Kat. And so, with security and straight dead eyes, the negotiation goes off without a hitch. Except, Virgil straight up kills the baby. And Lilith, apparently a little more excessive than I imagined. However, this needed to be done in order for Mundus to activate his rage mode in order to open up the gates to hell. And that is how we were able to take care of Mundus. Dante and Virgil gets into Mundus' office and takes care of the bastard once and for all. They succeeded, only to have demons visible for the world to see, as humankind is forever feared by these creatures. This was also part of Virgil's plan in order to take over the world under his rule. However, unlike Mundus, where he wants to rule the world to stroke his ego, Virgil believes that mankind is doomed anyway, so in order to help them, he thinks enslaving them is the best course of action. Dante's having none of that, so the final boss commences, with Dante being victor, but Virgil fleeing, telling him that they'll fight another day.
And so ends the crusade of the DMC Devil May Cry story. So, what do I think about it overall? It kinda sucks.
I mean, on a fundamental level, it's passable. Objectively, it does its job. It sets up the beginning, middle, and end perfectly fine, and there's even some twists and tricks that were hinted. Virgil as a twist ending was fairly obvious, especially if you played any of the Devil May Cry games before this one. But regardless of the negativity I mentioned, I think how they handled the twist was very well done. The problem I have with the story, in my opinion, was that it wasn't very exciting. Not to say that the previous Devil May Cry games had great stories, mind you, but at least it was entertaining with popcorn cheese. With DMC Devil May Cry, I was honestly very bored of it, and it didn't really help that I didn't really like any of the characters. Mundus was a pretty one-dimensional villain alongside Lilith. She seemed more like a stereotypical stay-at-home wife who continuously clingy towards Mundus, who I'm pretty sure without the baby, gave no fucks about her whatsoever. The same can be pretty much said for all the villains within Mundus' army, with the exception of Barbaros. He was the only character that was hateable enough for me to feel motivated to kick his ass later, and it certainly was a fine payoff, but afterwards, nothing. And this doesn't extend to the villains either. The main heroes are also pretty bland. Dante just comes up as a straight-up douche in this game. There are some funny moments with him, I will admit, but for the most part, this bad boy type of attitude completely contradicts his entire story arc as a character. The first time we met him, he clearly gave no fucks about the substance of humanity. In fact, I think he pretty much despises them. And now all of a sudden, I'm expecting him to care about mankind because of Cat? I think his motivation would have been to avenge his father and mother or something, but both their parents are only mentioned in one chapter, and it's a fine chapter, mind you, for both Dante's and Virgil's backstory, but it doesn't really go anywhere with the exception of maybe this cutscene where Dante literally opened his heart and felt it to see if he feels anything. I swear, this sounds like something out of a bad fanfic. Speaking of bad fanfic, Cat. She's pretty one-dimensional as well. Her only purpose is to serve as a secondary character and a potential love interest to Dante. I think, but once again, it really doesn't develop any further beyond that. Her interaction with Virgil would have been better if we knew more about both of their characters. Aside from Virgil maybe saving her, and I think that might have been covered in the DLC where you play as Virgil, but I'm not going to cover that for this video. I think she was a huge missed opportunity to be another Lady or Trish of the trio. She could barely fight, and her magic that transports our hero and anti-hero to the world of the living versus the world of Limbo only serves for the gameplay and nothing more. As for Virgil, he's actually my favorite. I believe he's done somewhat competently, and his personality certainly shines the most. He makes for a good character, and when the twist where he becomes the true bad guy comes up, it's shocking enough for me to pull back a seat and actually care about the plot for once. Virgil works very well as a stern and manipulative brother of Dante. He has family connections, and it feels as though Dante and Virgil are true brothers, especially with the backstory of how they played together as kids. I also have to give special mention to this scene too. Near the beginning of Mundus' fight, Dante and Virgil are clearly having a brotherly moment, and it kinda got a chuckle out of me. I point this out because a lot of people thought this was out of character for Virgil, but in my opinion, I think it works as it builds more of a brotherly relationship towards Dante and Virgil.
And I got a bigger dick.
So when it turns out that he's only helping Dante just so that he can take Mundus' place, it kinda stinks to know that you're fighting against the one person you somewhat trusted. It's also foreshadowed very well when Virgil's objective decisions turns out to be somewhat sinister, like leaving Cat behind and killing Lilith and her child. However, other than that, the story was practically bland. Virgil wasn't exactly the main star of the game, so to have him kinda shoved aside for the other uninteresting characters was pretty disappointing. We start at Metal Gear Rising somewhere in Africa, where we are currently residing alongside the president of, Africa. Raiden, our main character, is here to negotiate a peace treaty when suddenly the van gets attacked by a few terrorist people under the Desperado name, one of them being the reoccurring rival of Raiden by the name of Sam, who has one of the most adorable looking smiles. Another member who has also kidnapped the president of, Africa, a sundowner whom his motivation is to continue and jumpstart the war economy. That way he gains more capital when continuing to do what he loves doing, and that is to kill people. Metal Gear re-emerges and Raiden decides to take care of it. Raiden then rushes over to give chase to Sundowner in order to rescue the president. Never mind. Interrupted by Sam, Sundowner is given the chance to escape, and we get our ass beaten. Blinded and incapacitated, we lie there as we lament about our male fission. However, not all hope is lost as several days later, Raiden is rocking a new suit of armor filled with the brim of enhancements. Alongside our Maverick partners Boris, Kevin, Courtney, and Dr. our new mission is to infiltrate a Russian military objective and neutralize the terrorists and their leader Andrei Dozayev. During our crusade, we are interrupted with various of intruders such as Blade Wolf, a cybernetic canine, and Mistral, a half-French, half-African cyborg with multiple smaller robot buddies to aid on her mission. After neutralizing both Henchdog and Woman, Dozayev proceeds with his own mission objective and just blows up the power plant, killing himself and boosting the war economy. Or so I assume. They never really explain why he did this. He just blew himself up and Boris was like, oh, okay, I guess mission accomplished. Whatever, we head to Mexico and head for the sewer level, now accompanied by Blade Wolf. During our investigation, we come across George, a child who's been abducted by the Desperado alongside many other children in order to be harvested for body parts and organs, either to be sold in the black market or used as cybernetic enhancements. He's also a fan of Ninja Turtles. The person running this jig is Senator Armstrong, a Colorado presidential candidate of America's 2020. George is taken hostage by a Desperado scientist that was in contact with Senator Armstrong after Raiden's attempt to rescue the rest of the children, but George sacrifices himself, allowing Raiden to cut off the scientist and himself in half. Realizing the sin that Raiden has committed, killing his own best friend, he must lament about his actions, fearing that the consequences, while for now are for the better good of the world, will forever haunt him in his night. Psych, he's okay. Apparently all it takes is some duct tape and cybernetic body parts and he's good to go. Knowing the horror of child soldiers, he rushes into Denver to stop Desperado, while his Maverick hunters and comrades object to this extremist line of reasoning. Raiden's judgment to protect those who are weak are far more stronger than any ideology. This drama is not really that big of a deal, as it only occurs in one scene, and afterwards they get back to Raiden's side, albeit incognito style. Eventually, Raiden meets up with Sam again, and questions Raiden's own morality about having them harvest children, when even the men and soldiers Raiden has been constantly butchering to pieces also lead a life of their own. This triggers Raiden to having a sudden collapsing meltdown as he slowly travels to World Marshal HQ and encounters not only Sam, but Monsoon as well, exclaiming that what they are doing is not so black and white as it seems, and it's the literature of memes that motivate him and Desperado to undergo a killed or be killed mentality. And when I say memes, I meant the context of this game as a meme in this world is an ideology, theme, or artistic tendency. It's stupid, I know, but just roll with it. After all that monologue, Raiden turns off his pain inhibitors in order to activate his new persona, Jack the Ripper. With more fuel for vengeance, he disposes Monsoon using his new eviler persona. Continuing forward through US Marshal, we see even more child brains being stored in robotic containers, and we face off against Sundowner. Raiden takes him down with an immediate haste. However, with Desperado's evil plans, he needs to get into Pakistan faster than Mach 2, otherwise another war on terror that can rival 9/11 will commence. But luckily, the team knows someone part of Solus that can travel the jet faster than Mach 23, so it's our job to head to their headquarters, only to be interrupted by Sam. They both commence their rematch with Raiden being the victor, and they finally arrive to Solus, being introduced by this weeaboo, and Sunny, who originated back in Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Thanks to her and Solus, they are able to arrive in their aircraft base on time. It's time to take down Senator Armstrong and his Metal Gear Excelsius, and after a flashy finale, Armstrong comes out of his shell in order to face against Raiden head on, and Raiden gets his ass kicked.
Don't fuck with me, Senator!
Fascinating. Yada yada, blah blah blah, exposition about kill or be killed and how the strong will strive and the weak will perish. As Senator Armstrong further laments how this ideology will make America great again. That's not a Trump reference, that's an actual line Armstrong said before 2016's presidential election. Pretty sure this is either a coincidence or an excerpt taken from Ronald Reagan, but still, the phrase is still pretty uncanny. After a motivational speech from Blade Wolf and Sam's last final words, Raiden wields Sam's katana in order to deal the final blow to Armstrong. At the end of the day, George works as an assistant for Solus, while the Maverick Gang and Dr. open up an orphanage for kidnapped children. As for Raiden, he gives us a cliffhanger, ending Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Overall, yeah, this story is a huge nonsensical mess, but at the same time, I think its over-the-top nature really helped nullify this dumbness. Platinum Games is a master of over-the-top action, and what they tried to do more than anything was entertain rather than make a cohesive story. This is further amplified by all the villains and sidekicks of the game, Sundowner and Armstrong being over-the-top extremists, and everyone else being calm but statistically mean. The Mavericks are entertaining in their own ways, though I do kind of find them more bland and similar to each other, being the stereotypical fight for the good fight type of people. Ironically though, I think Raiden has the weakest arc. He's supposed to be the hero of the story, but his Jack the Ripper persona kinda contradicts that. The Jack the Ripper persona seems to serve only as a means to give Raiden a power-up, otherwise his persona just bothers me. It also doesn't help that this persona only appears in one chapter. Sure, it's hinted a couple of times, but when it finally shows up, it ends and being somewhat disappointment. I didn't really like Raiden when he's quote-unquote evil, it just kinda makes him look bad. For comparison's sake, I certainly enjoyed Metal Gear Rising Revengeance more than DMC Devil May Cry. To be fair, both games are pretty nonsensical and by no means masterpieces of literature. It's funnier and the characters are a lot more likable. While both bad guys are complex and entertaining in their own ways, I think I like Armstrong more just for his batshit insane politician-like persona. Hell, it's as if he was a wrestler riling up the crowd, and I think that's what Platinum Games was trying to go for. An entertaining madman. Virgil does make more of a threatening villain as he's more manipulative and conniving, but the tone of DMC was all over the place when it comes to their humor, so... That's what I think about the story for both games overall. I believe that Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is a lot more lighthearted and funnier, whereas with DMC Devil May Cry, it's pretty boring in my opinion. But, story aside, what do I think about the hack and slash engines for both games? DMC Devil May Cry uses two buttons to attack, a range gun attack, a jump button, and dodge. But further into the game, you're also allowed two extra weapons where you can alternate between the two trigger buttons, one being a weapon from heaven, and one being a weapon from hell. These two weapons are needed in order to defeat certain enemies, but they can also be used on regular enemies in order to extend combos, and you're gonna need to do them in order to achieve triple S rank. You also use your demonic and angelic weapons for platforming too, jumping from one platform and grabbing a certain platform for ease of landing. This is something unique to DMC and I actually really like this mechanic. However, there is the number one issue I have with this, and that is whenever you attack the wrong enemy with the wrong weapon, you're completely stunned and open for attacks. This is not a huge issue in open areas, but in cramped areas, it's difficult to try to multitask, especially when there's more than one enemy with different exclusive weapon weaknesses. I think an easy fix for this would have been to just have them deal a little bit of chip damage, and have the weapons go through the enemies instead. Otherwise, it gets really annoying when dealing with multiple enemies with different weaknesses. The platform controls, while basic, adds another layer to the fighting that you may want to experiment with. I do think that most of these platform sections are somewhat too linear, especially during boss battles. It's practically abused, minus certain exceptions, but I do like how DMC handles platforming. Speaking of boss battles, while their personalities are either bland, boring, or straight up stupid, I did have a lot of fun fighting them. I think the weakest boss battle has to be the very first and the very last, but in between them sprinkles in a variety of different challenges that's certainly appreciated. It's not by any means difficult, but the enemies have a good tell in terms of their animation, and their platforming brings another dynamic within the fight. I should also add that for the most part, I do think the difficulty is somewhat fair. I don't have too much of a difficult time playing through this game, and I think for any beginners of hack and slash games, this is a good start. Harder difficulties also give a worthwhile challenge towards those who seek more practice. I didn't really bother unlocking them, but judging from their descriptions, I believe this would satisfy most hardcore fans of DMC. Comparing this to Metal Gear Rising Revengeance combat system, it uses a traditional light and heavy attack with a jump button, a counter, and a dodge, which you have to unlock. Not exactly sure why the dodge mechanic is an unlockable, but the levels before you have this ability is designed in a way that you don't necessarily need it. For example, these gorilla-looking enemies have a hold attack, also known as a grab attack, that can't be countered, and he appears in the chapter after you unlock it. No other enemies have this ability beforehand unless you play on the higher difficulty, and even then, that can be negated when you're playing New Game Plus. Aside from that, you are also able to increase your attack power, endurance/vitality, and unlock new abilities and weapons to enhance your fighting style. Unlike DMC, however, these are not required to use in order to obtain an S rank, as Metal Gear Rising uses more a traditional S2D rank system, and one of the easiest ways to attain an S rank is to not get hit. Simple on paper, but difficult in execution. Though I don't think I had too much trouble with this game either, as there is a mechanic in which you can heal instantaneously if you manage to extract electrolytes from any enemy that has them inside their bodily fluids. This may sound pretty broken, and to be fair, it sort of is. On top of having Jack the Ripper, which amplifies your attack power, it is one of the reasons why this game I feel is easier than Devil May Cry. However, I like to imagine this as more of a reward fighting system. If you fight very well, not only do you get healed, but BP points as well in order to upgrade your stats. Besides, when you play this game on harder difficulties, you will practically need this as they deal a lot of damage. Harder difficulties, once again, showcase a good balance between skill and difficulty, and I believe this game does a very good job at luring casual players of hack and slash to more harder difficulties. Boss battles vary from enemy to enemy, but my overall opinion on fighting the enemies of Desperado range from easy to absolutely fantastic. My weakest boss battles would have to be a tie between Monsoon and Mistral, as I think Monsoon's battle went way too longer than it needed to take, and Mistral is just pathetically easy, even on the hardest difficulties. More so when you had to fight both of them in a rematch during Sundown's chapter. However, overall, I very much enjoy all the boss battles as they give either an interesting tactic that pertains to the Blade's mechanic mode, or just an overall fun, challenging experience that surely gets a player pumping. Graphically speaking, DMC looks kinda ugly. Most of the boss battles look more low poly and low textured, and I understand that Ninja Theory was going for more of an unappealing atmosphere, as that's somewhat of a vibe I'm getting from when I experience this uncivilized empire. I just don't personally find it eye-catching at all. Now, looking at whenever Dante enters Limbo, that's when things are starting to get more interesting and it looks more special. It makes me wonder why this entire game can't look as good as this when it's in Limbo. Red is a huge motif in the realm, and it's very fitting representing the demonic entities and hell on earth. But there's also some angelic looking scenery which I find very eye appealing. The combination of both light heaven skies and demonic evil dark red blends in very nicely together with the theme of DMC. The UI does its job properly as it's both aesthetically pleasing, especially during rank up battles, and distinguishing between blue and red backgrounds are very easy, although there are some moments where they do somewhat blend in with the background. With Metal Gear Rising, it's decent and it gets the job done. Not in particularly realistic, it is a lot more gray and brown for the most part. The only time I notice a semblance of color is the UI. At the very least, it's very easy to tell where my health and absorption bar is, and when the quick time event shows up, it instantaneously tells you what to press. Furthermore, later on the levels, most of these prompts utilize the same buttons, such as extracting fluids with circle and Zendatsu with L1. Animations are a lot more over the top and stellar and makes the cutscenes feel a lot more action-packed. But other than that, it's really all about it. The graphics are pretty plain as a military shooter, it's not its strongest pursuit. So, in conclusion, Metal Gear Rising overall had the better story and gameplay, but I won't dismiss the fact that DMC can still be enjoyed to a certain extent. The gameplay certainly holds up for the most part. While not as intuitive or fun as Metal Gear Rising, I still enjoyed my time playing through the game. The story is easily its downfall, as I simply don't care for most of these characters. They're either pretty dislikable or not really developed too much, with the only exception being Virgil's character. Metal Gear Rising doesn't really do too much for all its characters, but it does have more of a defined personality that at the very least makes it entertaining. So, the winner is Metal Gear Rising Revengeance.
And that's going to be our first episode of Compare and Contrast. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, feel free to click on that like button. And if you guys have any comments, feedbacks, or critiques, I would much graciously appreciate any and all of them in the comment section down below. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the series, because next week we're going to be covering 2 more games and compare and contrasting them as well. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. This is TheBassSinger, signing out.